In case you missed it, here's a Sports Animal Rewind.
Let's talk college football. It's time for the Sports Page Summer of College Football, presented by Buddy Gregg RVs and Motorhomes, our daily preview of teams and conferences around the country for the upcoming college football season. Find Buddy Gregg RVs and Motorhomes on their Facebook page, their website at buddygregg.com, and follow them on Twitter at Buddy Gregg RVs. Now, let's take a look at the South Carolina Gamecocks.
To help us do that, we bring in from GamecockCentral.com, covers the South Carolina Gamecocks, friend of the show, Scott Hood. Scott, Vince, and Brendan, how are you, sir?
Vince and Brendan, how you guys doing?
We are great. Hope you are, sir. We appreciate your time as always. So we'll start there, even though there's one superstar on the team. We'll start with what Steve Spurrier said coming back from break, talking about those running backs. Replacing Marcus Lattimore in Mike Davis, Brandon Wilds. Talk about that running back position.
Well, that's obviously the old $64,000 question: is who's going to take over for Marcus Lattimore and carry that load? Are they going to be able to find a guy who can carry the ball 20 to 30 times a game, like Marcus did, or are they going to basically split the carries? I think what's going to end up happening is I think Davis and Wilds will end up dividing the carries pretty evenly, with a third guy getting a minimal number of carries every game. Even Steve Spurrier, after spring practice ended, on the annual spring tours, basically said that Davis and Wild would divide it probably a 45-10 type of deal, because they are that close. The competition was very intense during spring practice. It's very close, and really not one guy really has not separated himself from the other. So I'm expecting a twosome in the running back department this year, and I'm looking for both guys to probably get maybe 15 carries a game.
All right, Scott, let's shift to the other side of the ball, and the guy everyone knows. Just when I was going through the numbers last night and kind of looking at the roster and everything, is it me, or does Jadeveon Clowney returning almost just kind of supersede or override the fact that South Carolina has lost a decent amount on the defensive side? You had top 5 linebackers and safety with Swearinger and Devin Taylor on the line. Does Clowney returning almost wash out what they lose in terms of perception?
No, but guys, here's one thing I know about Clowney. I know he's crossed the threshold from athlete to celebrity. When I saw last night on Twitter, there were national reports that he is now dating an Atlanta Hawks cheerleader. When that's news,
that a guy.
You know a guy has become a celebrity rather than an athlete, and that's if you talk to Deke Adams, you talk to Lorenzo Ward, that's going to be part of one of the obstacles that Clowney is going to face. He has to is the mental part of it. He's going to have to be willing to accept the fact that he's probably going to be the most heavily scrutinized player in college football this season, because everyone knows he's going to be the number 1 draft pick next April. And I mean, that's a foregone conclusion. As long as he's healthy, I mean, in fact, Mel Kiper told us often this past leading up to this year's draft that Clowney probably would have been the number 1 pick had he been eligible. So we all know who the number 1 pick is going to be. It's just a matter of Clowney going out and playing well, and then the other guys around him playing well too. In fact, USC's got a shot to have one of the top defensive lines in the entire SEC, if not the country, with Clowney, Kelsey Qualls in the middle, and then Chaz Sutton on the outside. A lot of people haven't heard of Chaz Sutton. He's been a reserve defensive end. He's a 5th-year senior. He's sort of found himself behind Clowney, Melvin Ingram, and Devin Taylor the last few years. But he had a very good year last year. In fact, numbers-wise, he had a better year than Devin Taylor did. So he's a very good defensive end. Of course, Kelsey Qualls in the middle is starting to emerge, and I know that Lorenzo Wood thinks he can break out, become one of the top defensive tackles in the SEC. So they're going to have a very, very good defensive line. Now the question is going to be: is will the young linebackers emerge and fulfill expectations? Obviously, you had 5 seniors there in that group last year, all freshmen and sophomores this year. Very few of them have any playing experience at all. They all did well during the spring, but obviously, as we all know, there's a huge difference between spring practice and Saturdays in the fall in the SEC. So we'll see how they do, but they certainly have a ways to go here, and preseason camp's going to be critical for their development.
Visiting with Scott Hood from GamecockCentral.com. Today, our focus on the South Carolina Gamecocks, previewing them in 2013 and our sports page summer of college football. I want to go back to Jadavian Clowney, Scott, and it's an interesting point to where they're going to have to keep tabs on him and monitor him off the field. Everyone's talking about how Kevin Sumlin has to do that with Johnny Manziel. You have to do that with the projected and expected number one overall pick in Clowney. But on the field, what are the things that this coaching staff wants more from him, or are they just going to be happy getting the big plays when they do get them?
No, I think they want Clowney to become a better all-around player, not take plays off at all, become a better at run defense. We all know he's definitely an elite pass rusher. In fact, he had 20-something tackles for loss last year, a whole bunch of sacks. That's a full record for sacks in a single year. In fact, he's made it his goals this year to break both those records again, and I wouldn't doubt at all if he did. But he's definitely going to get better at run defense, get better at reading the plays and things like that, and getting better, getting bigger and stronger. Really, I know that there's no such thing as a perfect player. If there was, everybody would want him. So they still have some things to work on. Like I said, both physically and mentally. Just the way his mental approach to the game. He's come to really study the playbook. He admits sometimes he freelances too much. Sometimes that drives the coaches crazy. But also, we all know he's a great player. And I think once he masters all those things and hits the weight room and gets bigger and stronger, I think he'll be. I think he's obviously going to have he should have one of those special seasons we see every once in a while from great players.
All right, Scott. So we'll start this question by prefacing it. This is a big if that we'll start with. So if Connor Shaw is healthy throughout the entire year, everyone knows Spurrier likes to throw in different looks at the quarterback spot. So if Connor Shaw is healthy, doing his thing, what would you project the split being with him and Dylan Thompson when he kind of comes in and gives them that pro style look?
Well, I think it's going to depend on whether South Carolina is winning. If South Carolina is winning and Connor Shaw is healthy and doing well, I think Connor Shaw will get the vast majority of the snaps. I think the plan right now is to start Shaw, let Shaw take the majority of the snaps, and then sort of integrate Thompson into the game in key spots, just like they did last year in the bowl game. And so really Shaw's health is really going to answer that question. Right now, I think Shaw is one who's experienced playing on the road in the SEC. For example, as you guys know, in week 2, South Carolina's got to go to Athens and play Georgia, which would be a huge matchup in the SEC Eastern Division. I think in that situation, I think the coaching staff wants a Connor Shaw to start and play most of the game because Dylan Thompson does not have a lot of experience playing on the road in the SEC. So in those situations, I think Connor Shaw is certainly the best option for South Carolina. And I think in the fact that Connor Shaw is able to throw and run, and he gives them another threat to run the football in the perimeter, I think he's still the best option. Now, Dylan Thompson has come a long way as a quarterback over the last couple of years. Now he is miles and miles ahead of where he was back in 2011. So if he can continue to develop and continue to make progress, I think he'll be used maybe 2 or 3 series a game at least, just to change things up for the offense, and we'll see how he does.
Visiting with Scott Hood here on our South Carolina preview day from GamecockCentral.com. Let's hit on some of those other units on offense. And I'm going to start with the receivers. Ace Sanders moving on to the NFL. You have Bruce Ellington. You have Damiere Byrd. There's some guys, as you well know, Scott, that have gotten some snaps, but everyone now has to get an elevated role. Talk about that receiver position.
Right. Well, right now, with Ace Sanders gone, Bruce Ellington will definitely become the number one receiver. But behind him, guys, there are a lot of question marks. You have guys like you mentioned one of them, Damiere Byrd. Shaq Rowland, Shamir Jeffrey, Alshon Jeffrey's younger brother, KJ Brent, Jody Fuller, Quentin Smith. All these guys most of them are unproven and untested at the SEC level, and a lot of these guys have to step up if USC wants to have a productive passing game this year and not just rely on Bruce Ellington all the time. So, no, I think right now Bruce is head and shoulders above anyone else in that receiving core as far as experience. I think Damiere Byrd show potential. Remember, early in the Outback Bowl last year, I think the second, third snap of the game, he caught that 56-yard touchdown pass against Michigan. But unfortunately, we haven't seen that enough from Demir Bird. We need to see that more. He's the fastest player in the team. He has decent hands. He's a pretty smart kid, so he understands the playbook. Now it's time for him to go out there in the field and prove it. And along with guys, of course, like a Shaq Rowland, who's the number one prospect in the state of South Carolina a couple of years ago, and one of the top wide receivers in the country. It's time for him now to step up. He only had 5 catches last year, and what was at times a very frustrating freshman season for him. So, and of course, Shamir Jeffrey has done nothing in his first 2 years here in the program, and in fact, he to the point where he got a tongue lashing from his older brother about the time to step up and do what you have to do to play. So, we'll see how it goes. I think a lot of these kids have talent, but they're unproven. So again, it's a question of we'll see what happens when preseason camp starts and what happens on August 29th when they open the season against North Carolina.
All right, Scott, before my next question, I think we should apologize to our readers or our listeners, because between your New England accent and my Philadelphia accent, I imagine people in Knoxville are bleeding from the ears. So let's apologize.
And I look like I'm from the Northeast, even if I'm not.
But let's jump back to Mike Davis for 1 second. He's kind of considered one of the best young running backs in the league with Kelvin Taylor at Florida, Brandon Williams at A&M. But still only had 52 carries last year. What did you see from him in terms of the great projections that people are seeing from him, and the great things ahead that a lot of people are kind of touting him as being capable of doing?
Well, he's about 5'9", 5'10". He's got low center of gravity. He's got a great burst of speed. He's faster than you think. He did fumble on a couple of occasions last year in key situations, so that's sort of a black mark. But if he hangs on to the football, Mike Davis has the potential to become one of the top running backs in the SEC, no doubt about it. If you recall, his older brother, James, played running back at Clemson and was a very good running back at Clemson back in 05, 06, 07. So he has sort of the pedigree in the family. And then he showed flashes of his potential last year. Now the question is going to become, can he handle becoming the number one running back and handle that responsibility and learning his pass blocking assignments and doing all those things that a running back in the SEC is expected to do. If he does, I think he has a chance to become one of the best in the league.
Yeah, I think people forget he was one of the more highly recruited running backs. Tennessee was recruiting him as well.
No, he was. In fact, he was the number one running back in the prospect in the state of Georgia last year. So for the 2012 recruiting cycle. So he's obviously an elite running back. We like I said, we saw flashes of that last year, but obviously, as you mentioned, with Marcus Lattimore and Kenny Miles around last year, where Davis didn't get a whole lot of carries until late in the season. In fact, really, if you look at his numbers, most of his carries came after Marcus was hurt in that Tennessee game last year. So Davis came on and did pretty well. But now the question is, can he do that over the course of an entire 12-week season in the SEC?
Scott, talk about the offensive line and having to replace T.J. Johnson specifically at center.
4 or 5 starters return, which is a good thing. I know Sean Elliott, the offensive line coach, I really like that a lot. Now they're starting to build some depth. Yeah, this is certainly going to be the deepest offensive line that I've seen since I've been covering the team since 2005. They're focusing now on offensive line recruiting. They're signing 4 or 5 guys every year now, which is good. For a period there, they didn't sign many offensive linemen at all, and the ones they signed didn't work out. So the depth was really depleted there. But now they're building it back up again, and to the point now where they have 3 groups of 5 now, solid groups of 5 of offensive linemen. So 4 or 5 stars returning. And I know, but the T.J. Johnson replacement is going to be a redshirt freshman in Cody Waltrip, a kid from down from Florida, who's one of the better offensive line prospects from the Sunshine State a couple of years ago. So, but I think he'll be surrounded by guys that play a lot of snaps, and I think the fact that they have all that much experience, I think it makes us Steve Spurrier and Sean Elliott pretty happy. And I think that it come to the point now where the offensive line could become a strength rather than a weakness, which has unfortunately too often been the case in the past.
Now, I'm sure Vince and I will talk about we'll break down the schedule a little bit more later in the show, but while we have you on, when you look at things, it's a very manageable schedule. You obviously have the big one with Georgia early, and then you have a 3-game league road trip, but it's Missouri, Tennessee, and I want to say Arkansas back to back to back.
Yeah, right.
But between a very, for all intents and purposes, manageable schedule, especially by SEC standards, and the fact that you have one more year with Clowney before he goes to the NFL, one more year in Connor Shaw, right before, is he a senior?
No, yes.
Okay.
Connor Shaw's a senior.
Right.
Dylan Thompson's a redshirt junior. They both signed the same year, but Shaw did not redshirt.
Right. Okay.
He played as a freshman under.
So one more year with Shaw, one more year with Clowney, the manageable schedule. It's kind of back to back 11-win seasons, back to back top 10 finishes. Is this being viewed down there as not make or break by any means, but kind of the perfect storm? These are the expectations to finally get over the hump, maybe win the SEC, maybe even sneak into that BCS title game.
Yes, even Steve Spurrier has mentioned that it looks like all the pieces are in place this year to make a serious run at the Eastern Division title and to get to Atlanta and maybe perhaps win the SEC championship. Certainly, when you have the most dominant defensive player in college football, you've got a senior quarterback, you've got a very experienced offensive line. You still got some guys, still got a lot of talent left in the secondary. Certainly, this is being viewed as the year that maybe South Carolina's best chance to finally win their very first SEC title. But also they have to go out on the field. They got to do it. They have to go, as you mentioned, week 2 they got to go to Athens. Then after that they have to play. They got a home game against Vanderbilt, and they got that three game trip to Tennessee, Missouri, and Arkansas. As we all know, guys, they haven't played very well at Arkansas in recent years, and have never been to Missouri. And then of course they finish with a bunch of home games, which is good. I think if they can position themselves, and maybe with only one loss going into the final stretch of the season, I think all those home games at the end of the year will pay off. They got Florida, Coastal Carolina, and Clemson at home to finish and Mississippi State to finish the year. So they have a very advantageous last 4 or 5 weeks of the season, but they have to get to that point with one loss maximum if they want to have any shot at competing for the SEC title and perhaps for the national title.
Scott, real quick, we only have about a minute, but I want you to touch on two areas that we haven't touched on yet. South Carolina's seemingly very good secondary, and then special teams.
The special team is going to see some changes. They got a new kickoff guy, but Victor Hampton's going to become the punt returner now. Remember, Ace Sanders was a punt returner, and he was a pretty exciting one. So Victor Hampton will take over the punt return. Bruce Ellington will still return kickoffs. The secondary, obviously losing DJ Swearinger would be a big blow. That's going to be the major question mark there, in my opinion, is who's going to take over for DJ Swearinger. They have rotated a lot of guys in and out of that spot in spring practice. But really, from what they're going to miss from DJ Swearinger most is his leadership and his emotional leadership. Now, he was definitely, even though they had Clowney and Shaq Wilson and 5 senior linebackers, he was definitely the leader of that defense. So that's going to be the key question there in the secondary. Who's going to replace DJ Swearinger from a leadership perspective?
Scott Hood, at Scott Hood 63 on Twitter. Good follow. Get the latest on the South Carolina Gamecocks from GamecockCentral.com.